Sir Alan Stanford, an American billionaire who's already invested heavily in 2020 cricket in the West Indies, is now turning his attention to England.
The Texan billionaire made an audacious entrance to announce his audacious plan at the home of cricket.
And if you've ever wondered what 20 million US dollars looks like, here it is.
One night, one game, winner take all. The loser goes home unhappy, the winner goes home very happy.
The English cricket establishment gave their unequivocal support.
It's like when you see a movie, you're like, wow, that was cast perfectly. That role was just made for that individual.
None of it made any sense. There was no way it could be a legitimate financial institution.
We didn't have any idea what was going on. It just didn't seem right.
Would you accept $1 million as winners?
If you didn't want to dig too deep, you say, hey, you're saving West Indies cricket. Everything seems to fit.
Mr. Stanford was a humanitarian.
What we're seeing in the books is not what the investors are being told.
Some folks look at him as the Robin Hood.
If you want to rob $1,000, you need a gun. If you want to rob $1 million, you need a pen. That's it.
People who play cricket and who love cricket intrinsically know what the spirit of cricket is. Cricket stands for fair play and doing things right. You respect the game and you respect each other. You know, cricket is not about money. It's about playing a decent sport and playing it decently.
My first memories of the Stanford Super Series was seeing him land at Lord's, a place that every international team, they dream of playing at Lord's as a player. It's wonderful. So seeing him land in a big helicopter at the home of cricket always looked a bit funny to start with from a player's point of view.
Lord's is always seen as being the home of the game. And I remember turning up that day, just wondering what the hell was going on.
He's been the sport's big bankroller, with a smile as wide as his wallet and a who's who of cricket as his friends.
And you've got to remember where you're at. You know, you're at Lord's Cricket Ground. I mean, have been an England captain, and for me sometimes to get through the long room, to go and look at the pitch for the toss the next day, I have to get past 5 security guards and people on gates and things. So it was quite unusual for Lord's just to let someone land on their hallowed turf. But at that stage in world cricket, it was changing. Money was coming into the game, and suddenly the goalposts had moved.
Ready for party? Ready? Now that you're here and you're in the game, things won't be the same.
At that moment in time, T20 was taking over the whole world of cricket.
2020 cricket is just entertainment. It's short and sharp. It's only 20 overs a side, loads of fours, loads of sixers, lots of music, fireworks going off, and essentially it's there for people who can just come and watch it for the evening. Test match cricket is played over 5 days, sometimes not even a winner, which is hard to explain to people who don't know cricket.
Contrast the scenes of the typical 4-day county championship match in England. It's easy to see why the cash is all heading to 2020 cricket instead.
The IPL had changed everything. Basically, you could make your fortune for 6 weeks' work in India.
Suddenly, you know, the big lights of the IPL were shining very brightly, and a lot of players were starting to have, you know, the heads were turning, and we were all questioning, you know, are we going to have an opportunity to play?
At that moment in time, our administrators did have to do something. How could England retain its own players? And the answer to that was obviously by paying them more.
Gentlemen, if you've ever wondered what 20 million US dollars looks like, here it is.
One night, one game, winner take all, $20 million. The loser goes home unhappy, the winner goes home very happy.
At that stage, he looked like someone that we meet regularly on the cricket circuit, someone with a load of money, someone that sort of wanted to surround themselves with celebrity, wanted to be part of the cricketing world, and the game welcomed him with open arms.
Giles Clark, chairman of the ECB. Sir Alan is a man after your own heart, surely.
Oh, very much so. He's a great, legendary entrepreneur. He has the entrepreneur's skill of spotting an opportunity and seizing it and taking it forward.
It is Billionaire Day here on Squawk as we get billionaires' take on the economy. We're moving on to a legend who started in real estate and expanded to emerging markets. Sir Alan Stanford, great to have you on the program. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you doing?
Great. For those who aren't familiar with the firm, 62 companies founded during the Depression by your great-grandfather. You are the sole shareholder.
Stanford was incredibly wealthy and keen for the world to know that he had money. That's certainly the mindset I had of him.
Before we let you go, is it fun being a billionaire?
Well, yes. yes, I have to say it is fun being a billionaire, but it's hard work.
David, this is a great opportunity for you and your players.
It's a wonderful opportunity, NASA, and there's going to be $1 million for each of the players in the 11 available for that match if they win.
So let me get this right. If you win, $1 million per player. If you lose?
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
We didn't know exactly what was going on, apart from there was going to be a T20 series played between England and these Stanford superstars.
I mean, to be fair to the board, they faced a situation in which they could lose a significant number of their leading players. But I hated the notion of English cricket getting into bed with some sort of financier. I hadn't done due diligence on him, but then who had, frankly?
Oh, really? I'm kind of it.
When will I get
I remember watching the press conference on TV. I was with my parents, actually, and they just thought it was crazy, but also, what an opportunity. But you're seeing people, the absolute legends of the game talk about how exciting it is, that they were behind it all.
Viv, what do you make of 2020 cricket? What do you make of this match?
I'm ever so privileged to be part of this whole setup itself. There was a lot of criticism. I guess it did ruffle a few feathers. Some were saying, this is not cricket, man. This wasn't, But there's a lot of us hate to see change,
All we really knew was that he was supposedly a Texan billionaire. Nobody knew who this character really was, or indeed what he was really up to.
In 2008, I was a prosecutor in the fraud section at the Department of Justice. I got a call from Mike King of the SEC, and he said basically that he needed our resources and our talent in the fraud section in order to investigate what he thought might be a Ponzi scheme. And so I said, well, what are you talking about? And he said, well, we have this person who we think has stolen about $6 billion at the time. I had never heard the name Alan Stanford before. And so the first thing I did was went on my computer and Googled Stanford International Bank. It was really incredibly underwhelming. When you looked at sort of who the board of directors was, one of them was Stanford's father, but nobody with any substantial financial acumen. It was a bunch of non-financially savvy knuckleheads. There's no way these people are running a $6 billion financial institution. It's just impossible.
Why are you giving away 20 million US of your hard-earned cash on one game?
Well, Nasser, I don't think I'm giving it away. I'm investing in it in cricket's future for the West Indies. As everybody knows, we're in the bottom of the trough right now. And I've been in the Caribbean for 26 years, and when you see something that you love so dearly, it's that glue, that fabric that binds us all together in the West Indies at the bottom. You want to do everything you can to bring it back up.
This call, cricket, lovely cricket. So all they got to do is lick the ball before it reaches.
Cricket in the Caribbean is very important to people. It's one of their great drivers. It put the Caribbean on the map.
I'm a diehard West Indian to the death. Best team in the world, ever. No matter the result. The one thing all of us have in common is cricket. Every Caribbean island, or the English-speaking Caribbean island, was cricket. We all spoke that language.
There's always a lot of talk about the sort of golden era of West Indies cricket in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, where they brought through some incredible players.
During that time, we had some wonderful players. Sir Andy Roberts, Sir Mikey Holt, Sir Vivian Richards, Courtney Walsh, Curtly Ambrose. These guys were some of the greats.
Richards went on to reach his 100 in just 56 balls, the fastest Test century on record. Antigua's recreation ground went wild.
We became great at that particular time. Winning creates confidence. You know, losing can also be contagious.
Bear in mind that West Indies cricket was nothing like the world-beating team of the 1980s. Cricket was starting to fail in the Caribbean, financially bereft, and the soul had gone from West Indies cricket.
We had a group of young cricketers that were very talented. But if you look at it, cricket had started becoming professional now. West Indies didn't respond. We did a test, just a basic health check. Every single one of the players had an iron deficiency because the way we eat. So there was nobody working on their diet, nobody working on their training until the early 2000s when Alan Stanford comes along and for the first time creates professional cricket in the Caribbean.
Texan billionaire Alan Stanford has lived on Antigua for 20 years, and his private cricket ground is now home to a bright new dawn in the game. Stanford's mission is to rescue cricket in the Caribbean. £15 million has already been spent on this state-of-the-art training facility in Antigua, and more will follow on other islands.
You know, the atmosphere was like amazing. I mean, it was nothing that the islands have ever seen. I don't know, it's just so exciting. Just thinking back about it now just give me goosebumps, honestly.
Do you accept $1 million as winners?
Some folks look at him as a Robin Hood at that time, you know, so to be fair, you know, this island benefited a whole lot from him.
I'm committed to put another $100 million into play.
He was Sir Alan Stanford, you know, so he was basically like, if I can say, like a god around here.
Make no mistake, for this guy from Houston who knew nothing about cricket, this was all geared primarily at how he could grow his business.
If you didn't want to dig too deep, you say, hey, this guy's a sort of philanthropist, you know? He's saving West Indies cricket, they're skint, they've got nothing, so everything seems to fit.
To start a criminal investigation, you just have to have enough evidence to say it was likely that there were criminal activities going on. So that's how we began. It was basics. Had the Bureau ever come across Stanford in the past? Who is Robert Allen Stanford? And what does his company do?
Hello, I'm Alan Stanford. From our beginning 75 years ago, we have grown today to a global group of wealth management companies serving clients in 126 countries.
By 2008, Mr. Stanford had a huge offshore financial services company held in Antigua. He was definitely the man. Antigua was a very poor country. He brought in an influx of cash.
Wealth management services for domestic U.S. clients come through Stanford Group Company, Stanford Trust Company, and Stanford Coins and Bullion.
Mr. Stanford was a bigger-than-life personality in the Caribbean. He had a lot of money to throw around. He was jetting all over the world. He had more jets than Ford Motor Company had. So we were developing a picture of a man who obviously was spending a lot of money and presenting himself as a billionaire. He had a lot of money to throw around, and that was raising red flags of where is this money coming from?
I'm pretty sure I'd never heard of Alan Stanford. As wealthy as he was and as big as his empire was, he was kind of on the edge of the known financial world. And so the first question was, who the heck is this guy? I happen to have a little bit of an in that I happen to be from the same little corner of Texas that Alan Stanford was from. He came from a little town called Mejia in central Texas, south of Dallas. Mejia's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's kind of on the road there. When his parents divorced when he was 9 or 10, he ended up with his mom up in Fort Worth, bumbled through a couple of small colleges before finally arriving in his early 20s at Baylor University in Waco, where he began to become a thing. Alan Stanford was a party-hardy kid from a small town who had 3 interests I can think of: scuba diving, women, and making money. And he was loud and proud about all 3. It's not clear that Alan had any great plan upon graduating college, but soon after, he buys a health club. It's pretty clear that this entrepreneurialism is what Alan Stanford is born to do. Alan began selling memberships to people in Waco for $100 a month. And you know, within 12 months, he is doing good business enough that he can begin to look around for other gyms. He is pretty much an overnight success. Within 2 or 3 years, he's bought another gym in Waco, and before you knew it, he had 10. But from the beginning, Alan thought big, and that's a talent. What we do know about Alan's private life suggests Alan led a heck of a private life. He had a wife, a quiet wife who lived at their apartment, and it's pretty clear from talking with his senior employees that Alan also enjoyed the favors of young women in pretty much every town where he had a gym. If Alan came into town, he was out on the town, and he was seldom alone. Alan was known at his clubs for swinging into town, running in and saying, "Jimmy, how much money you got in the till?" And he'd take out a few hundred for his night on the town with whatever person that he was seeing, and it seemed to be a life that was really working for him. That's not a bad life for a man like Alan Stanford in Waco, Texas in 1976. Alan and Total Fitness are doing very well. And around 1980, he gets his idea for he's going to go the big time. He's going to Houston. But Alan had the bad luck to open his biggest club yet at the beginning of an oil recession, a national recession, where Houston just went.
During the 70s, Houston was a real gusher of real estate growth, a 20th century boomtown of soaring skyscrapers, apartment complexes, and big spenders in big hats and pickup trucks.
Now the oil slump of 1982 has halted growth and created millions of square feet of silent, empty space at a cost of millions of dollars.
And that's what happened to Alan Stanford and Total Fitness. By 1982, he and the clubs were in bankruptcy. It was over. The funny thing about this bankruptcy is that not only does Total Fitness declare bankruptcy, but Alan himself declares bankruptcy and declares $13 million in personal debts. Now, I don't know how you go $13 million in debt in Waco, Texas in 1982, But this was a man who, certainly by Waco, Texas standards, was living really high on the hog.
As a privately held, wholly owned group, we have the advantage of always placing our clients' interest above that of any shareholders.
I wasn't sure what it was in that first 6 months that we were looking at it, what kind of crime might be happening at Stanford. So you had a company that was paying returns year after year after year. You didn't have any years with losses. They're always showing a positive rate of return.
When you're dealing with commodities and investments, it's very difficult to beat the market year after year after year. It's virtually impossible.
But again, we didn't have any idea what was going on. It just didn't seem right.
Powerful private wealth management services for affluent investors, an uncompromising level of one-on-one service, built by an entrepreneur for entrepreneurs.
It's almost too good to be true here.
To begin to understand Alan Stanford, you actually don't have to know that much about banking, because he didn't.
What's the name of these things?
In the mid-'80s, Alan Stanford moves to the Caribbean because he gets the idea that he could start a private bank. Here he is, a bankrupt Texas fitness chain owner on this fly speck of an island in the middle of the Caribbean that has, a few tens of thousands of people with 300 banks. So it was sort of this notoriously corrupt banking haven at the time. So he opens up a bank called Guardian International.
The unusual thing about what Alan did in Montserrat is 19 out of 20 of these banks there's no building. Like, if you checked the address on their license, it's a bar. Literally, a lot of them were based in bars. Alan did something that almost none of the others did. He actually built an actual brick and mortar bank. He made an effort to make it look like an actual thing. He had pictures of his dad and his grandfather up, suggesting that this bank had a history going back to Central Texas, all of which was just a bunch of BS.
Ever since my grandfather founded our first business in 1932, we have been committed to providing an uncompromising level of personal service. And 7.5 decades later, we are still guided by that philosophy.
It's hard. If you're a normal person in the 21st century, you think a bank, it's got to be somehow reputable. It does not. I actually talked to a regulator on Montserrat who said there are only 2 reasons somebody would open a bank on Montserrat in the 1980s. Either money laundering or some type of fraud. In Alan's case, it may have been both.
In the 1980s, I was a fraud investigator assigned to the Caribbean islands. Intelligence came in that Stanford and Guardian International Bank were laundering drug proceeds for both the Medellin and Cali cartels. What we thought was he was laundering tens of millions of dollars. Oftentimes, it would be flown to the Caribbean in small aircraft. The money was palletized, several hundred pounds in each shipment to make it worth his while to take the money there and, actually launder it for them. But unfortunately, the movement of the money was in such a circuitous route that they couldn't prove that the money that he was taking possession of was actually proceeds of, drug crimes. It was frustrating, very frustrating.
The money laundering allegations continued to swirl around Stanford for a long time. But at the same time, he starts selling certificates of deposit. Well, certificates of deposit, CDs, are boring investments, a guaranteed interest rate over the time that they hold the money.
The perception of almost everybody is that that's a safe investment because it doesn't pay any interest. It pays a very small amount of interest. So people had this notion that automatically it was a safe investment.
If you wanted an extra 2 percentage points more, you might risk putting your money in some no-name bank in Montserrat. Turned out enough people did that Alan was actually able to make a go of it. And by the late 80s, he's claiming something on the order of $55 million in deposits. And I'm not sure that's a fraudulent number.
None of it made any sense as to what secret recipe he had. Stanford had no financial background that ran a bunch of gyms into bankruptcy. And then all of a sudden, he ended up owning a bank that could somehow guarantee better results on CDs than anybody else in the world was paying. It has to be a Ponzi scheme.
Here in 1919 is Charles Ponzi, self-styled financial wizard, loafing at his Boston mansion with his lovely wife and proud and adoring mother. Ponzi's proved his boast he can make 50% profit on investments in 90 days, and wise men follow him.
Charles Ponzi was an immigrant from Italy who lived in Massachusetts in the 20s. And he was telling people he would buy foreign stamps and then sell them at a much higher price. In reality, he was investing their money in his own personal livelihood, buying cars, houses, until, like almost all Ponzi schemes, it collapsed under its own weight.
Basically, all it is, you're raising money from people. You're promising them some incredible return, but you don't do anything to make money. To pay those people, you just go get more money from other people. But the key thing to understand is the Ponzi scheme only can continue by bringing in new money. That's the only way to keep paying off everybody. It's like a shark. It has to keep moving or it dies.
This new building tells you everything you need to know about how Stanford is growing.
Phil and I did not come from wealth. I was the first woman in my family to graduate from high school, much less college. I came from a very working class family. We knew how to work hard because we had wonderful work ethic, and we knew how to save. My advisor, Doug, called and said, I have something to offer you that has not been available before now, and that is a CD at Stanford Bank. He would say things like, well, I don't really need to explain why to you and Phil, because obviously you're bright enough to understand it. Well, I wasn't going to say, no, I wasn't at that point. Of course, we were bright enough to understand it. Did we understand it? Maybe not as well as we should have.
$1 million for a few hours' work. That's what's on offer to the England cricket team when they take on Sir Alan Stanford's Superstar 11. The Texan billionaire is offering $20 million to the winners. But the size of the prize money is raising concerns within the game.
The concept of winner-take-all and cricket just didn't go together for me. People did want to try and generate new markets for cricket at that time, and rightly so. But you can't pick up and play with something like English cricket. It's too precious for that.
I cannot blame any of those players. A payday, $1 million payday each for someone who was on 30, 40 grand county cricket or whatever they were on for their England contract. I don't know any cricketer that would have said, no, sorry, I'm not doing this. This is not right.
There was a lot of criticism in the press. The whole talk was, it was grotesque, it wasn't right, it's not how cricket should be, it just shouldn't be done. It felt strange even around Sussex. Suddenly it became quite a topic that was always spoken about was that I was going to be a millionaire for one game, and just everyone assumed that we were going to win it. You know, it was almost just seen that it was inevitable that was going to happen. You know, I remember going to social events with Sussex, end of season social events, and being made to wear a T-shirt that said, you know, I'm a millionaire, those sort of stupid things. So, yeah, it was strange, but still, we were playing a game for a huge, vast sum of money. It was still exciting as well.
Antigua is a former British colony, now independent, run by the deeply corrupt prime minister, is this fella, Lester Bird. And he was able to move into Antigua by essentially bailing out the failing Bank of Antigua and bankrolling a local hospital.
Hello, I'm Alan Stanford, chairman of the Stanford Financial Group and Stanford International Bank.
About the only difference in Antigua was Alan changed the name of the bank. Instead of Guardian, it's now Stanford International.
The first couple of years are pretty quiet in terms of just doing the bank. But we started seeing him in the mid-90s when he started flexing his financial muscle and started building things.
He proceeded to try to do nation building, I guess, on a private level.
Let me transport you back to the island of Antigua, to what was once vacant, windswept grasslands adjacent to V.C. Byrd International Airport. Today, this unassuming land is being dramatically transformed into something truly remarkable.
As a small country, we've had a lot of people come here and speculate. You know, give me 20 acres, give me 100 acres, and I'll do this. What he used to do is come, buy the land, and do it. He said he's going to build a trust building, he built it. He said he's going to build an athletic club, he did it. He said he's going to build a stadium, and he did it. He said he was going to build a marina, he did it.
He put a lavish banking headquarters complex together, looked like one of those Caribbean plantations. And then he overhauled the airport because he needed to bring in jet loads of investors to show off the private banking complex.
It was corporate America moved into Antigua for the first time.
Welcome to Bank of Antigua.
Coming out of school, you had an opportunity now to work within a first world type organization in Antigua, in finance, in development, in insurance, architecture, where you're doing things that historically was for non-nationals. And I think, you know, the Stanford organization opened doors to Antiguans that weren't necessarily available before.
Mr. Stanford was a humanitarian. In 1995, just a few months after I started with the company, we had a major hurricane here in Antigua.
This is what the scene looked like as Luis unleashed its fury in the Caribbean on Wednesday.
A few days after the hurricane, Mr. Stanford flew in a cargo plane filled with food boxes for his employees. I remember him saying, "Carol, if the employees are not comfortable, the work cannot get done." He expected perfection, professionalism. I think that was his mantra, was the company to work for.
It's difficult to overstate Stanford's popularity in Antigua, especially among the ruling class, where his money made quite a difference. In those early years, when Alan's buying him a hospital and he's opening a bank and a fancy new restaurant and a big cricket field, he just looks like Santa Claus has arrived on Antigua and is showering presents on just anybody and everybody.
He was the largest employer on the island, and they treated him like a king. And since they couldn't make him king, they knighted him and made him an honorary knight.
For services to the community and the economic development of Antigua and Barbuda.
And he referred to himself as Sir Alan from that point on. I mean, he lapped that up. That's the best con in the world, is that you can wrap yourself in that veneer of respectability so that nobody sees the rot at the core.
cool tropical breezes greeted prominent guests and fans of cricket as they arrived for the Hall of Fame ceremony. Making appearances were Antiguan Prime Minister Lester Bird, all greeted by host R. Alan Stanford.
From the beginning, he was very generous to politicians in Antigua. He knew he needed a place where he would not be looked at closely, where he could do his thing without much scrutiny.
I want to welcome everybody honoring a sport that represents collectively the society and culture of the West Indies.
He saw cricket, and he said this to me, as a way for him to establish himself internationally. You see, he was big in the US, in his mind. But if he could become an item in the cricket world, well, then he's automatically in Australia, he's automatically in India, he's automatically in England, through this vehicle of cricket.
I mean, by the end, opposition parties were claiming he basically was running the bird machine.
I think you must find it intriguing that it took a Texan who knows not a thing about cricket to conceive together with us this notion of something that brings a lot of pride and dignity to us all. Let's give him a round of applause.
One of the things small countries have to be wary of is making kingmakers. I was a member of the opposition party. We were more wary of what he was doing. Our government, our politics is small enough that a wealthy guy could come and buy the government. When we say buy the government, you need 9 seats to win the government. Yeah? So if he pumped money in 11 candidates to make sure they won, he could basically be kingmaker.
Antigua had everything that Alan needed in terms of permissive financial laws and kind of a wide open, freewheeling business atmosphere, which is a nice way of saying pretty corrupt. It was amazing. Within 3 years, Alan is claiming $350 million in assets in this bank. In time, he was doing well enough that he was able to put together almost the beginnings of what looked like a Caribbean financial empire.
The Stanford tournament offers the biggest prize in team sport. Luke Wright is likely to be called upon to do his bit with ball and bat to help his team scoop the millions.
There's going to be a lot of people watching it. Obviously, the money can sometimes be a factor that people talk about, but I think we've just got to enjoy it.
We were so unprepared. I mean, some of those guys, especially the big players, hadn't played cricket for the best part of 2 months. It was the end of the season in the summer, and the game wasn't going to be till late October. So we decided together, look, why don't we try and do some training to at least get ready? Because, you know, you play for $1 million each. You know, it's silly not to.
A few of us sort of paid for ourselves to go to Barbados to train. I don't think I've ever had to pay for my own training pre-playing for England before. But maybe that was just my nerves as a young player. Maybe I was just I haven't got the experience to just turn up and play.
Imagine the catch goes up, there's 2 to win, and you drop it. How do you ever get back with the lads that you've done that? They'll always forever hold it against you that you've lost everyone all that money. But the way that it happened, we got out there, it was, well, I think it was rainy season, but it literally rained every day. We were trying to train on Astros, and it was just an absolute shambles, really. But we tried, but it just didn't happen.
This game is all about money. England's cricketers will get $1 million for 3 hours' work. If they lose, the wisdom of coming here at all will be questioned.
From the ECB point of view, I think they presumed that we would just turn up and win. At the time, I don't think the West Indies had been that strong. It was probably seen as just a golden ticket. Here you go, lads, you know, turn up a week before, you get yourself $1 million, we'll move on. All the other issues that are happening, whether it's IPL or whatever grievances the players are having, we'll put it all right because we'll turn up and we'll just get this payday and everything will be sweet.
You know, I think the biggest difference in this investigation was that we had no victims. There was no loss, nothing like that. So we don't know if there's a crime at this point.
All the employees were happy. The customers were happy. So it was a very difficult veil to pierce getting into that company.
The SEC is challenged with investigating potential fraud cases. We had a case known as the Stanford investigation. There was strong suspicion, even back in the late 90s, that Stanford's bank couldn't really pay the type of returns that they were promoting. But when our office tried to get information to validate the assets of the bank, we got stonewalled. What we really wanted to do was to gain access to the bank's books and records in Antigua so that we could figure out what was going on here. The SEC routinely communicates with financial regulators from other countries, and there is a substantial amount of cooperation.
Leroy King was the chief financial regulator on the island, akin to what the United States has as the Securities and Exchange Commission.
We asked the regulator for access to bank records, and we got nothing but positive assurances that the bank was healthy. It never occurred to me that the regulator in Antigua, Leroy King, was corrupt.
Leroy King referred to Stanford as Big Brother. There was at least $300,000 that were paid over the years to Leroy King, $9,000 worth of Super Bowl tickets, private travel on Stanford's jets. And then he owned Leroy King. Leroy King and he actually had a blood brother oath.
To become blood brothers, they cut their hands to solidify their bond.
So he's very quickly building in a layer of protection for himself. And once he's got that layer of protection, it was his private kingdom. It just happened to be a Commonwealth of Antigua. So he could do whatever he wanted.
Oftentimes, the SEC partners up with the FBI and the Department of Justice. We share information, and we work together collaboratively.
The SEC had been looking at Stanford, but were not getting the answers that they needed. So they came to the Bureau because a criminal investigation has more power than the civil side of the investigation.
The Bureau and the government does not want to create a problem for a company. That's a big handcuff when you don't have a victim or a purported crime to occur yet. So we went a proactive approach where we were looking to introduce undercovers.
So the strategy was, can we get an investor in front of Robert Allen Stanford to get the pitch and find out what were they investing in?
In the mid-90s, the bank had about $350 million in deposits. By 2004, it had grown to just under $3 billion in deposits. And in 2008, it was $7.6 billion in deposits. That's staggering.
By 2008, he's got 30,000 individual depositors from 131 countries. And nobody yet has a clue what it's all based on.
Okay. Live, work, up there and do business. All right, I'm ready.
And action.
We continue to make our commitment to every conquest. Continue to make our commitment to every. We continue to make a commitment. We continued our commitment. Who wrote this? We continue.
Sir Alan Stanford, an American billionaire who's already invested heavily in 2020 cricket in the West Indies, is now turning his attention to England.
The Texan billionaire made an audacious entrance to announce his audacious plan at the home of cricket.
And if you've ever wondered what 20 million US dollars looks like, here it is.
One night, one game, winner take all. The loser goes home unhappy, the winner goes home very happy.
The English cricket establishment gave their unequivocal support.
It's like when you see a movie, you're like, wow, that was cast perfectly. That role was just made for that individual.
There was always a sense that this feels weird. Alan Stanford sitting there knowing that he's bought the England cricket team.
You've sold your soul, lads. That was when the players first properly realised what they'd got themselves involved with.
The lads absolutely hated Alan.
Our growth over the last few years has been nothing less than phenomenal.
It was a very difficult veil to pierce getting into that company.
You know the data's wrong. The math is bad.
We needed to get the truth out.
He's got everything to lose, and we could be taking the keys from his castle. We were scared to death.
Una ready for party? Una ready? Now that you're here and you're Hindi.
The excitement building here at the Stanford Cricket Ground in Antigua, England, looking forward to that 2020 for $20 million on Saturday against the Stanford Superstars.
None of us have played for this kind of money before. Certainly the first time it's ever happened in the history of cricket for this kind of money, so there's going to be some nerves around, but hopefully we can, we've got the experience in the side and have them calm nerves to put the performance in.
I remember seeing a lot of advertisement on the island when we were there, advertising this big event was coming to Antigua. That's always exciting. It's always good fun to go and train and play in different countries.
There's going to be a lot of people watching it. It'll be fun. I think we just got to enjoy it. If we win, we win. If we lose, then it's just been a great experience. We get to go to Antigua and have fun.
I'd not been long in that England team, or so everything was new and exciting to me anyway. I was playing for my country, it was something I'd been dreaming of since I was a kid. And then suddenly, I'm involved in this game for an obscene amount of money.
It's the largest single payment for a sporting match. It's 2020 for $20 million.
The whole atmosphere, it was just amazing. Trust me, just everything about it was just great. And then you're playing against the big England team with Kevin Peterson and all these guys coming down, and that was the cream of the crop. The opportunity that Stanford gave us to be a fully blown professional team, it took us to a different level.
He had a great presence on the island. Like the first thing you see, bang, his stadium straight away outside the airport.
There's a stadium named after Stanford, and there's buildings around the ground about Stanford, and it's his banks and everything. It's the Stanford 2020, 420 as they called it. Everything was about him. I just saw someone that was a bit flash with a load of money that wanted to buy his way into the game.
What is your motivation? Why is someone who's not particularly interested in test match cricket spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a 2020 game?
Number one is to get this sport re-energized in the West Indies with the younger athletes and the younger crowd. Number two is to create a commercially viable enterprise. And by that, I mean something that would not only sustain itself, but would grow to a point it could make money. And we have a business model that year after next will be making a very good profit with this. And then the third thing is I wanted to have some fun. I was lucky enough to get this interview with him, but he was just all over the place. He was a couple of mobile phones, the phone was ringing in the background, and hold on, I'll be back. And he looked for such a person who was, supposed to be so organized and everything. He looked a bit chaotic. Who knows why he was so busy?
Mr. Stanford was a bigger-than-life personality in Antigua, and he had a lot of money to throw around, and that was raising red flags of where is this money coming from. technically, our jurisdiction is not Antigua. They're a sovereign country. We have no right to go in there without their permission and conduct any investigations.
We started doing what we could do to keep tabs on Stanford's headquarters in Houston, Texas.
This new building in the heart of the Galleria Financial District tells you everything you need to know about how Stanford is growing.
In the mid-90s, he opened a classic broker-dealer. It was such a legit operation, but he didn't want to have anything to do initially with the American market because it's very regulated, and he wanted to operate outside of that arena.
The funny thing about Alan's business, really the first 10 years, he's primarily focused on Latin America. But the fact is, those markets are finite. Alan had pretty much squeezed all he could get out of Venezuela. He'd squeezed Mexico. He was still working on Ecuador. What about the U.S.?
He realized, I'm missing the true cash cow here, which is the American investor. Next thing you know, he's got mom and pop retirees, he's got retired refinery workers, blue-collar laborers who have worked hard all their lives to put together a nest egg for a comfortable retirement. And he just preys on these people.
We were referred from friends here within our development, and we would get circulars inviting us to attend a dinner presentation up at the golf course grill. Then they would bring out a little mini van and take us down to their headquarters. Even had like gold
marble floors and gold
handrails going up to the next floor.
Always had beautiful bouquets of flowers in the reception room.
They greeted us by name.
Having security, knowing my name when I got out of the car, and he would hold the door open for us. A man with a gun would hold the door open for us. My God! And we were just treated special. They always offered us lunch in that private dining room. The chef would come out, and he would talk to us first name basis. It was great. I really feel like I was really important.
I was impressed by all of it. I could tell you that it didn't mean anything to me, but it did. If it had been a shamble of an office, I wouldn't have felt very secure.
They just really made us feel special, and I guess as you get older, you lose that when you're no longer working. So it just gave you that feeling of, this is cool, right?
And we felt the company was doing well, you know?
Abe Lincoln or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that.
He would tell investors he's offering 2% more interest than anywhere else. Because I'm in Antigua, where the operating costs are low, the tax compliance costs are low, and I have the secret sauce investment recipe that just outperforms everybody else.
Our global investment strategy minimizes regional risk while consistently providing our clients an exceptional yield on their deposits.
I pulled all my money out of retirement to put into Stanford, into the international. Yeah.
I actually invested probably like at $133,000 total.
We had close to $300,000 invested with them. I will say it's triple digits, a lot of triple digits. But I would rather not say.
The money was supposed to just be going out to Antigua to sit in the, the vault and make nice, safe, conservative investments. But most of it never got there.
If you had any sense how Alan had lived and operated in Central Texas, you know exactly what type of life he starts living once he starts getting serious money in Antigua.
He took living out of the till to a whole new level. According to the FBI, he went to Vegas for his birthday and dropped $200,000. He spent $20 million on yachts.
Not one house, but I think there were at least 4 or 5. Houston, Antigua. One place outside of Miami, Tideclef Castle, I think it was, 53-room manor for 10-something million dollars.
He was married and had one child through that marriage. And then he had other women and other children in other cities throughout the country. We called them the outside wives.
Thank you.
And so we were trying to figure out, is he committing some kind of fraud with the investors' money? And one of the most important things that I learned in the white-collar field was to try to simplify it. Fraud is just taking somebody's money and doing something with it that's different than what you told them to do.
If you've ever wondered what 20 million US dollars looks like, here it is.
So you have to pay very close attention to the details, the accounting methods used.
A lot of times with the white-collar investigations, it's going to be on the accounting side. It's very hard for a white-collar crime to happen without the help of an accountant.
One of the things that we figured out early is he had Jim Davis, who was his number 2, the chief financial officer, the head accountant.
A leader realizes early on that he cannot do it alone. And those around you must share your passion, your obsession to grow, your obsession to improve, and yes, your obsession to win.
At that time, we had no idea how important Jim Davis would become to the investigation. Stanford was the gregarious, big personality older brother. And Mr. Davis was quiet, kind of subdued. He always seemed to take a subservient position to Alan Stanford.
Stanford brought people in who couldn't get a similar job in another company. That made them loyal to Stanford because they had no other place to go. Jim Davis, in the 80s, was working as a mid-level accountant for a discount store called Gibson's. So he couldn't have gone to another financial firm and been a chief financial officer. He just didn't have that kind of resume.
A criminal investigation is a very patient process. And we were being given rein to try to develop the best investigation possible. We were looking at all different kinds of investigative techniques. We were really boots on the ground. We were doing surveillance, trying to figure out who Jim Davis was, what he was. I actually walked into an office in the town that he lived in and told him I was a developer and was interested in the history of the community. We learned that he was considered a very nice, benevolent civic leader. He was also a leader in the church.
Davis worshipped Stanford. It became kind of a sacred, not a sacred, it's like a secular worship almost.
Pretty shitty explanation here.
He enjoyed, I don't know, the reflected glory. And then being part of an organization that was claiming to be so wealthy and doing so well. He would do just about anything that Stanford asked him to do. And then he began to emulate Stanford in lots of characteristic ways. One of the most interesting being that he became an adulterer just like Stanford was.
Mr. Stanford didn't have a large number of executives and lieutenants.
The organization was way too flat for a multi-billion-dollar company. You expect many layers of management.
Stanford only had Jim Davis, who was his number 2, and then he had a chief investment officer, Laura Pendergast Holt, a young woman in a position That was kind of unusual for somebody of her age and education at the time. So it didn't make sense.
So I probably met Jim Davis for the first time at church. I was 16 or 17 years old. They had recently moved into the community, Jim, his wife, their 4 sons, and I was in their Sunday school class, and Jim was the main leader. They lived in a house out in the country. They had a lot of land. We all thought they were farmers. Everybody just liked him. Everybody respected him. He kind of became a pillar of the community. After I'd been in his Sunday school class for a while, he announced to the class that he was taking us on a mission trip to Antigua. Would have been 20, and he would have been 45 at the time. And our job is to go build a church. And when we're all getting dressed in the morning in like cutoffs and t-shirts, he would walk in a suit and tie. And I remember walking up to him and saying, well, clearly you're not a farmer. And we laughed about it, and he's like, no, I'm not a farmer. I said, well, then what do you do? He said, well, we have an international bank in Antigua. And I'm like, wow. I said, that's really interesting. I said, well, if you should ever need a mathematician, give me a call. Sure enough, flew to Houston, had, I think, 3 days worth of interviews. They said that they would like to hire me as a research analyst, so that was the first time I heard what my job title was going to be, and that I'd have a starting salary of $35,000. Everybody else who I was in school with who had been offered jobs were starting at $70,000, $80,000 to have a master's in mathematics. And I remember telling my grandmother that. I said, should I ask for more? And she's like, absolutely not. You're working with Jim Davis, and I'm sure if he says $35,000 is a good salary, it's a good salary. And so I took it. She thought Jim Davis walked on water.
Let's go to Laura.
It is an honor to work alongside such a devoted group of individuals that make up such an amazing team, the Stanford family. He did start teaching me finance. He did start teaching me analysis. And I was a good learner.
I would now like Laura to tell us about the global deposit rate environment. Laura?
Globally, as one can imagine, we have a very wide range of rates available. So I was research analyst, then I became vice president of research. Then I was made managing director. The more you knew, the more you tried, the more you excelled, you were rewarded for that. Yeah, it's like working your way to the top of the class. There wasn't a glass ceiling. These rates ensure a profitable margin spread for the bank. Jim?
Thank you.
I was 5 years into the job. We were in Miami for a meeting with Jim Davis. We were all supposed to go to dinner, but at the last minute, his assistant couldn't join us. And it was just the two of us. We're having dinner, and he says, I remember the first time I met you. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember too. I'd come home for Sunday school. And he's like, and you had this dress on. And I'm like, wow, he really remembers. He walked me back to the room, and he kissed me goodnight. Really out of the blue.
With me today is Laura Pendergast-Ami, our Chief Investment Strategist, and we're going to...
I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat there and I'm like, what do I do with this? Do I quit? If I do, where do I go? This is the only job I've ever had. I'm doing well. I like what I'm doing. If I mention it, am I going to lose my job? And the next morning I saw him in the lobby and he's like, "Good morning." And it was business as usual, nothing had changed. A few weeks later, he professes his love, and he said from the day I walked into a Sunday school class that he knew I would work for him, and he knew one day we would have a relationship. And that's when he told me he'd like to take the relationship to the next level. And then I had to make a decision.
Laura?
And I made a bad decision. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Without question, the worst mistake of my life.
Hands up to the skies, in the air, let's rise, feel the cricket vibes.
Welcome to Antigua. It's game 2 in the Stanford Super Series, and the 2 English teams make their entrance today. It's domestic against international as Middlesex, the domestic 2020 champions, take on Kevin Peterson's England. No dollars up for grabs today, but big bragging rights.
Yeah, for England, it's preparation for next Saturday, you know, the $20 million big match.
We had 3 games. I think there was 2 warm-up games and then the Stanford 11 game. The perception of Alan Stanford within the side, it was always a sense that this feels weird. This feels strange. We were having a team photo, and I sort of remember him walking in almost like shooing someone out the way to sit in the middle. And there we are as a whole England team in our England shirts. Alan Stanford sitting there knowing that he's bought the England cricket team. It's pretty heartbreaking, to be honest.
It's a unique game of cricket here this evening at the Stanford Cricket Ground. It's England against Middlesex. It's a unique week of cricket, that's for sure.
When that England game was played and the floodlights were on and England were in the field, old Uncle Alan turns up, you know, having a great time, everybody. Bit of a high five. Everything revolved around him. He just had to be the centre of attention.
Last ball of Jude Broad's first over.
High, fielder going back, won't get there, or will he? Not quite.
I was either bowling or at mid-off because I could see the big screen really clearly. And he came up on the big screen.
Suddenly this electric screen lit up. And there's Alan Stanford up there on the screen. And he's got 2 or 3 of the players' wives in very close attendance. And everything stopped. And just this look of incredulity. And what could the girls do, to be fair? You know, they're there, they're guests, the players are out there playing cricket. This bloke comes in and says, bounce someone near set so-and-so, and it's all filmed and beamed across. You know, what choice do you have?
Who does he think he is? He can't just, he doesn't own everything about us. You know, he needs to have a bit of respect.
I don't think he had any boundaries with certain things, you know? He figured because of who he is, he could do certain things. And that was the type of behavior you expected from him, especially when he knew that the camera was on. Not something that we were very happy about, but it's his event, in his place, you know? And he chose to show it.
That was a key moment. That was when the players first properly realised what they'd got themselves involved with.
There's been a little bit of bad feeling about how prominent a part he's been playing in what has to be said was his party, it's his ground, it's his
train set.
Exactly. But he was playing with a bit more than just trains, you see. He got a little bit friendly with the players' wives and girlfriends, turning into an ego-fueled farce, says the Mail.
In terms of the wives and girlfriends, I had no knowledge whatsoever that these young ladies were, in fact, in any way connected with the English cricket team.
His reason for going in there was totally inadequate, nonsense. He knew exactly who they were. And I wonder if he's actually sending a message to the players. You know, hey, you know, I'm the boss, I'm paying you.
How does anybody compromise what they do and their principles for their job? And I think probably the biggest reason is always money. You hate to think that you could be bought. I've always said most people have a price. And when Jim Davis told Alan Stanford that he was having an affair, Stanford's response was, "Oh, good, she'll be loyal that way."
Jim was he was romantic. He was the type who would take you to a nice dinner. He was interested. He would listen. He was supportive. To say I didn't care for him would be a lie. I absolutely did. It ended after 2 years. I couldn't be the other woman. Once I said no, there was no more pursuit. It was very tense. We didn't really talk to each other. We would have very professional meetings, but they would be very short meetings, and only when absolutely necessary. But, honestly, I still respected him as a financial leader. I still respected him as a boss. I trusted him. After the relationship had ended, Jim had decided that it didn't look as professional to have the managing director of investments as it would the chief investment officer. And so he's like, okay, I will name you chief investment officer of Stanford Financial Group.
Let's give her a big hand. Laura?
I was a good public speaker. I could memorize a speech.
Laura has a photographic memory and she doesn't need all these pages.
If you handed a 3-page report to me, within 30 minutes, I could recite it back to you.
We must remain nimble. And really, that's all we've ever preached, is that you have to continually focus on risk aversion.
And I made a presentation quarterly to the whole group.
So Laura Holt spoke as if she knew what was happening across the whole company.
When I explain it to clients, they don't understand how Stanford International Bank makes money. And it's not because they don't understand it, it's just too simple.
There was a little bit of buzz in the financial services industry as to what was going on at Stanford and how was Stanford doing what they were doing. The SEC had asked Stanford for financial records, and Stanford didn't comply. And they were really stonewalled by the company.
Stanford International Bank was a black box. Their financials were not transparent. We wanted to know, what basis did a broker or a financial advisor have to recommend a certificate of deposit to a client? What information did they have?
So the SEC were just trying to find someone in the company to talk to.
Well, this is quite a memento.
This was from one of the trainings at Stanford, something they called Touchdown for Success. One of my prized possessions since I left. I believe it was about in 2005 that I was being courted and recruited for Stanford Financial Group. Certainly they had plenty of money. It was certainly a very nice place. I was treated very nicely and not really caring about me, thinking about how I might be able to better take care of my clients. Taking care of my clients has always been my #1 concern.
That was the true genius of Stanford. He would go and find the best brokers at other agencies and then lure them in, and they would bring in their books of business with trusted clientele that had been working with them for 10 to 20 years.
I've already mentioned that we have added a large number of talented new people. And to those of you who have not personally had the opportunity to meet, welcome to the Stanford family.
Stanford, like most con artists, realized you needed to dress up the fraud. You needed to really make it big and sound established.
There was enough window dressing that most of the brokers had no idea that they were working for a giant fraud. They just didn't know. And so those brokers would sell stocks and bonds, but they were incentivized by Stanford to also sell CDs for his Stanford International Bank down in Antigua. He would every quarter bring what he would call his top performers club together. And it was always some exotic location, big parties. And he would hand out the quarterly bonus checks in front of everybody with the amount up on a screen.
$93,448.
I mean, it was not uncommon for people to be getting $70,000 and $100,000 quarterly bonus. And the only competition, the only metric was CD sales. How many CD sales did you sell this month or this quarter?
SGC True Superstar, Mark Tidwell.
The product itself drew me to Stanford. It was very appealing to myself and I know to my clients. The Stanford International Bank CD program was kind of the golden goose that built all of Stanford.
We are celebrating our best year ever. Our growth over the last few years has been nothing less than phenomenal.
In the absence of documents and really legitimate accounting records, we needed human beings who will tell us about their experience at the bank. We needed Mark and Charlotte to come forward.
I worked at Stanford once upon a time. And I was one of them. That changed pretty quick. Certain clients that had invested in that offshore CD started to receive overnighted packages from the Securities Exchange Commission, the SEC, the supreme regulator in our industry. That concerned the clients.
My clients got more letters than any other advisor. So I had lots of phone calls. So Charlie and I did some research, comparing notes.
These red flags kept on piling up. We started to compare what they were advertising and some of the other things, products and services that Stanford offered to what my client accounts were actually performing.
The data's wrong. The math is bad. No one was getting the return numbers that they were using to bring in new prospective clients. Holy cow. Really? You know, Charlie and I looking at each other going, you know, whatever we think and whatever concerns we have about anything else, it's probably worse. These guys are cooking numbers that everybody has full access to. What are they doing with the things that people can't really see behind the curtain? I was sick in my stomach. Personally, I had put money into the CD program. I had family members that had put money into the CD program. I really just felt ultimately responsible. I got to get my clients out of here.
All we wanted to do was leave that place. Get out of there and get our clients out safe and sound. That conversation didn't go very well.
As soon as we left, Stanford sued us. They went after us.
I got this letter from Stanford and said, you did not resign, you were terminated, and we're going to prosecute you to the furthest extent that we can.
We really didn't know where to go at the time. We really felt alone and we were scared. I know that I was followed on multiple occasions.
That entire company was at risk of being shut down by what we knew. We had no idea what anybody might do.
I figured, I'm just going to call the SEC Fort Worth office to fight the fight.
We planned out the day before that we were going to leave and take different routes up there because we were afraid. We needed to get the truth out.
He's a billionaire. He's got potentially everything to lose. And we could be taking the keys from his castle. We were scared to death.
Spent more time looking in the rearview mirror than looking forward. It was scary.
We could have easily been followed to the SEC. We wanted to make sure that at least one of us arrived.
Charlie and Mark were brokers and financial advisors with Stanford Group Company. And they had the courage to leave the company because they couldn't get answers to their own questions.
These two brought that insider perspective of what we're seeing in the books is not what the investors are being told.
Getting to the SEC and turning over these file boxes made us feel good. We were relieved. We felt like, wow, that we can bring to light some of these things.
I think Charlie and Mark really underscored the essence of the problem, which was lack of transparency with the bank and the fact that the bank was simply a black box. With their assistance, we knew we were onto something. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. You try to put as many pieces together that you can. You're probably not going to have all the pieces, but you can see the picture. We didn't have a deadline, but we had to dig deeper and deeper and deeper to really figure out what was going on here.
Really struggling, England here. We've seen some horrendous cricket.
We were undercooked, and I think that showed in the first game against Middlesex. they felt more prepared than we were, to be honest.
That'll go for 4.
Another drop, another drop.
High in the air, over Madoff, over Peterson. Will he get there? Steadies himself, it's down! It's another, join the club!
Hasn't dropped the catch, who hasn't joined that club?
It was an uncomfortable feeling that we were so underprepared. You know, we should have got beaten quite comfortably.
Last ball. Low full toss. Hit to extra cover. They don't bother running. And England win by 12 runs. And there are smiles now on that England bench, but for a long time they were looking concerned.
I remember walking away from that game thinking, oh, you know, we're in serious trouble here. We're so off the pace.
There's obviously loads of areas we can improve, but yeah, a win's a win.
But actually, it was after that Middlesex game, that was it. The lads absolutely hated Alan, especially the big lads. The big players didn't. They just were like, nah, what are we doing here? There was a dinner that they refused to go to. They didn't want any part of him. And I think that was it. The lads were very much, right, we'll play this game, hopefully win, and then we'll get on the next plane, get on the first plane out of here, and that'll be done. To the point where I think half those guys didn't even want his money. They just wanted to get out of there and get home.
As that one match, grew closer and closer, the realization really dawned on them that this was ugly. Because you've sold your soul, lads. You know, you've sold your soul to the devil.
Members of Congress, friends, it's really a great honor for me to be here. And I want to thank the Economic Council for honoring me with this Excellence in Leadership Award. Now, these are not great words of wisdom from Alan Stanford, but whether you are a Christian, non-Christian, agnostic, or atheist, all you have to do is go to the Bible and you'll find story after story after story of what happens when you don't follow the ethical rules of the game.
Superstars of Stanford against England, $20 million at stake.
I think it was the most nervous I've ever felt going into a game.
Sir Alan Stanford, he's loving this.
All we really knew was that he was supposedly a Texan billionaire. Nobody knew who this character really was, or indeed what he was really up to.
Our theory was that he had been involved in a fraud for 20 years.
I would be banging the table every day saying, shut it down.
Laura?
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Everybody knew but me that there was trouble on the horizon. These rates ensure a profitable margin spread for the bank. Jim? The only thing I regret is that I had an affair with Jim Davis. That was a bad decision, and one that I paid dearly for.
We begin our coverage tonight of what's been called the worst financial crisis in modern times, certainly the largest financial disaster in decades in this country, and perhaps the end of an era in American business. Some of the biggest names in American business are tonight gone, along with a lot of money and a lot of jobs.
What's important at this point in time is that there is a global crisis in the financial markets. And this is going to start changing the way we have to go about looking at this case.
build-up, the days before, were quite relaxed. I just feel like the tension grew the night before the game because as a group of probably 16 or 17, it only became clear to us that only 11 players would get $1 million if you won. How does that sit? If you're not selected for the team, for the 11, is it fair you get nothing?
We had a long meeting about that and how it was going to be spread if we got it, etc. But it was crazy, you know, the night before a game, trying to talk about how you're going to split 20 million just seemed odd.
Madness. You should be talking about the cricket, but we weren't. We were talking about the finances. And I think we came up to just some like agreement, nothing signed. It was just like a handshake in the team room between the 16 players of, we will just divide this up, whether you're playing or not.
Okay, so off the match ident, I'm going to say blah, 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 $20 million at stake. There is a trophy at stake, but no one really cares. It's all about the money.
Going into the final, I just remember the nerves that I had, almost feeling sick in my stomach. I think it was the most nervous I've ever felt going into a game. You know, you can't help yourself but think of what the money could benefit. You know, there's things I wanted to do, but you've still got to win. There's every chance you're coming back with zero. And I think that's such a strange concept. It wasn't like there was any fee. If you lost, there was nothing. It was almost a waste of time if you lose.
Welcome to the richest ever single payday for a team sport. $20 million at stake. Superstars of Stanford against England. The talking has been going on since June the 11th, where Sir Alan Stanford landed his helicopter at Lord's, and now the action has to begin.
The atmosphere, man, that was like a time bomb waiting to. The people were so pumped, you know, were so ready.
Great atmosphere here at the ground. Around about 10,000 people in. A lot of Brits have come over for this game.
This place was rocking, man, you know, and this is all part of Mr. Stanford's dream. To see it like that, you know, create that environment that we could sell to the world.
It's 2020 for $20 million, the Stanford Superstars against Kevin Peterson and his England team. England have won the toss. They have decided to bat.
We were prepared. We were very fit. We were strong. You know, we looked like athletes. You know, we are mentally ready. And then you're playing against the big England team with Kevin Peterson and all these guys coming down, and that was the cream of the crop.
It's a jamboree, it's a carnival, it's a pantomime. And at the end of the day, one of these teams is going away with a shed full of money.
It's hard to get away from the fact that the whole series was just about money, just about PR. You don't play for England for the money. Well, we did that week.
And the first delivery goes down in the big money match.
Alan Stanford told the investors, your money is being invested in a safe, secure, liquid, conservative way. And it was anything but. People knew that he was investing money in cricket, but they thought it was his own money. They didn't know it was the bank's money.
Wonderful scenes. 100 countries this is going to, 100 countries.
What did Stanford think cricket was going to give him, really?
My initial conversation with him about those things was he didn't have an English banking license at the time. And I think part of the goal was to get a British banking license. Make no mistake, this was all geared primarily at how he could grow his business.
When you start a thing with a big box of money at Lord's, where do you think it's going to end up? It's not going to end up with, isn't this a great game? Wasn't that a great game of cricket? It's going to be about the money on offer and who choked and who got the money and who didn't.
Oh, yes! Bowled him, leg stump again, and the celebrations begin.
England batted, didn't get many, didn't go anywhere.
Bowled him round his legs. The important wicket of the England captain, Kevin Peterson.
Length again and bowled him. Everything going their way. Up in the air, mid-on's there. Will it clear him? He gets himself under it and takes the catch. Sir Alan celebrates. Everyone celebrates.
Desperate times.
Hold him now, it's over. 99 all out, it's 100 to win. Stanford superstars all over England so far.
He's loving this.
These guys were a very good team, but I think they underestimated us. To be honest, we know that they couldn't beat us, you know. We knew that we were going to win the game.
He's got this in the crowd go mad.
Well, he's turned up to the party, the superstars captain.
From that moment onwards, that was it. Gale and Fletcher just started whacking the ball to all parts, and the ball was going miles.
Oh, there's another. Way into the leg side, over the boundary, 6 more, 22 from the over.
It is carnival here in Antigua.
There he goes, another one for Chris Gale.
Absolutely incredible. The crowd love it.
You know, you play in the West Indies, they're hugely passionate, but this actually felt like there was a desperation for us to not take this money away. It needed to be given to the West Indies team and invested in West Indian cricket, and this Stanford was huge for their country, and he's doing so much.
Just look at this, the little lass is in tears.
This is what it means to these people.
England just want to get off. Well and truly hammered. Oh, big shot, he's at the 1-6, in style, here they go. What a victory, car's off. Start the car, Alan Stanford. It's changed lives at this.
In terms of cricket, that is a complete annihilation. Well, you can't really lose any more heavily than that.
Nobody gave them much of a chance against the favourites England.
It was just a tremendous feat for us, beating England, and England had their best team at that time.
To beat a very strong England team, wow. And individuals who weren't maybe known on the cricketing circuit until then. You know, that's where most of these guys made their mark.
And we won the money, the 20 million.
They deserve the title, superstars.
He's out there in the middle, I think he wants a knock.
I would now like to introduce on stage the instant millionaires. Andre Fletcher.
We'd lost the game. I remember hearing different names being called up to the stand to be presented with their $1 million, and all the fireworks would go off, and I remember just sat having a beer with Brody actually in the change room, and for every firework, you know, there was $1 million to someone else, and I think that's when it really hit. You are going home with nothing.
Well, that is a fat check if ever I've seen one, for sure. $20 million US.
Our cricket in the Caribbean is back! Back! We are back. We're going to take the world again.
Looking back now, thank goodness we didn't win. And that's quite a hard thing to say probably at 22 when someone's saying you could win $1 million US. It's life-changing. But thank goodness we didn't win that money.
Of course, little did we know the bigger picture, that things were by then clearly starting to go wrong with this company as well.
We helped the SEC. I'd given them all my documents, all my records. Then it went quiet. They told us, we'll get back to you right away. Well, right away isn't very fast when the government moves.
These two individuals didn't have the magic bullet that would have said this is a Ponzi scheme, but it was just, you know, eyewitness testimony that something didn't smell right.
If we were wrong, there would be a hell of a price to pay.
We knew the SEC just didn't know what they needed to know. Ultimately, what I think kicked everything off was Madoff.
Investors thought Bernard Madoff was earning big money for them, but the government said he made off with billions he stole from them.
The FBI alleges Madoff recently confessed he had been running basically a giant Ponzi scheme for years.
When Madoff happened, it came to our attention, something that we hadn't seen before in the United States, that a Ponzi scheme could actually last for 20 plus years. The traditional Ponzi scheme did not last that long.
The bubble burst when the stock market crashed and investors started asking for their money back. They found only a black hole.
Within a day or two, I was approached in the office by my supervisor, and he said, "We don't need to have a Madoff in our office, and if we do, we need to make some hard decisions right now." We issued subpoenas to Alan Stanford and Jim Davis. We wanted to go right to the top and have them sit in a room with us under oath and explain to us how the bank operated. They said that Alan Stanford and Jim Davis were, they operated at 100,000 feet and really didn't know the details. But if we really wanted to know the details, we needed to talk to Laura Pendergast Holt.
To do this, I'd like to turn the program over to Chief Investment Officer Laura Pendergast.
The attorney had told me that the SEC had a subpoena for me. He's like, and avoid it. Try not to accept it because I'm trying to work out where you can go involuntarily, where you're not going to be subpoenaed. Then Jim Davis walks up and he says, "Here." I said, "Well, what's this?" And he says, "Your subpoena." And he served me the subpoena to go talk to the SEC. And everybody knew but me that there was trouble on the horizon. I knew they needed somebody to talk about what investments are in the 3 tiers of the portfolio. I had been well versed on tier 1 and tier 2. I didn't know about tier 3. Tier 1 was cash management, which had to be at least 10%. Tier 2 was a slightly more aggressive portion of the portfolio. We could invest in equity, fixed income. It was several hundred million. My responsibility was making sure the accounting was done for Tier 2. Tier 3 was supposed to have been the conservative portion of the portfolio. The only people who managed Tier 3 were Jim Davis and Alan Stanford. So when Jim gave me the subpoena, I'm like, "But I don't know about the 3rd tier." He's like, "Well, that's okay. You don't have to present on that." He's like, "All you have to talk about is the part of the portfolio that you oversee."
When it became very clear that the SEC was seriously investigating the Stanford organization, there was a kind of a come to Jesus meeting in Miami. The top people, the top lieutenants are at that meeting, and Jim Davis essentially unburdens himself.
I was to meet with the SEC on a Monday, and Jim is working on his computer. We're all sitting around the table, and he said, "Laura, I just got a new Excel program, and I don't know how to make a pie chart on this program. Can you help me?" And I look over at his computer. I said, "Just hit this button, you choose what chart you want, and it creates your pie chart." He plugs it into the overhead projector. And it's the 3rd tier of the portfolio. I was speechless. That's where I learned that it was fraudulent. It was totally not what we had reported that had been done with the money. Part of the 3rd tier was real estate, part of it was private equity, and the remainder was loan to shareholder. Like a large majority was loan to shareholder.
Who was the shareholder that the loan was made to?
Alan.
It's the first time that all these executives of Stanford actually see that Tier 3 was a mirage. When the curtain's pulled back, there's nothing there.
All told, $2 billion of depositors' money ended up in Alan Stanford's private businesses, his spending, his various enterprises, and his whims. $2 billion out of $7 to $8 billion that were ever deposited in the bank. That's staggering.
one of the gentlemen around the table just started crying. An outside counsel asked if he could lead us in a prayer. And he said, everybody remember what you just saw as attorney-client privilege. He's like, so you were not allowed to discuss this information. I remember after we were dismissed, I was walking down the hall to another office. And I just ran my hand along the wall, thinking, it can't be fake. There is no way. There's no way it's fake. At that time, Alan had appeared, and he said, had I been here, this meeting would have gone differently. He was insisting that the assets were there. He was insisting that the picture we had been shown was not accurate, that that's not at all how Tier 3 looks. So, I don't know. I just don't know. I met with the SEC on February 10th of 2009. I knew they needed somebody to talk about Tier 3 to them. I did not think it was supposed to be me. I thought I was going in to make a presentation on Tier 2. I started my presentation. I hadn't gotten a page into it, and they're like, we don't care. That's not why you're here. This is why you're here. And then it was just bombarding.
I don't believe she had an independent lawyer with her at the time. She had a lawyer provided by the company, so she really was kind of thrown to the wolves.
I hadn't even been there an hour when I was put under oath. When they questioned me about Tier 3, their expectation was that I knew. And I did know, but every time they asked the question, my attorney objected. And he would say, that's client attorney privileged.
She was of little help to us, but her testimony made clear that we have a real problem here, that the chief investment officer of Stanford can't even tell us about the assets of the entire portfolio. We thought that a fraud scheme was afoot. We thought that it was probably sufficient to shut this thing down in its tracks.
I got a call in early February of 2009 that the SEC was going in. So I ran over to the building, and the doors were locked. You could not get in because they were questioning employees and taking out files and carrying out computers. And they just took over the entire Stanford organization in one day.
Today, federal agents raided Stanford's offices in Memphis and Houston and froze the assets of 3 of his companies, accusing Stanford and 2 others of massive ongoing fraud. Stanford is accused of running an $8 billion scam, selling certificates of deposit, promising sky-high rates of return. But SEC investigators say Stanford has peddled phony performance data for a decade. Now, federal agents have frozen Stanford's assets, meaning 50,000 customers can't get to their money.
I didn't have a clue that anything was wrong until Sandra called me and said, you need to turn the television on. Stanford's offices have been raided by the SEC. So I tried calling there and nothing. You couldn't talk to anyone. You couldn't reach anyone. You couldn't get your money. It was frightening.
Most of the brokers and the broker-dealer had no idea that they were working for a giant fraud. They just didn't know. I mean, they told the financial advisors, stand up, leave your cell phones, leave your laptops, leave the building. The phones were ringing off the hook with all their clients trying to, get a hold of somebody. Where's my money? How can I get my money?
Billionaire Robert Allen Stanford remains a free man tonight, though he is accused of massive fraud and may face criminal charges. Thousands of investors can't get their money, and a small Caribbean island where his bank is based is in shock.
The Prime Minister went on television and pleaded for calm.
There is no need for panic.
We weren't part of it. As the government, we weren't
part of any of that investigation, so nobody came to us and said, we are investigating Stanford, at least not the members of the cabinet that I know. But then we had to go through the after effects of the run on the bank and all this kind of stuff. It really put our government administration at the time under severe pressure.
There are hundreds and thousands of people whose livelihoods depend on the success and the continuance of his businesses.
I mean, he had, 3,000 employees in Antigua that either worked for him or benefited indirectly, you know? Then all of a sudden, all of them are out. Where are we going to replace those? So our main concern was, how do we look after the people who are now out of a job?
Investors are still trying to get their money out. Cricket finance put into perspective.
We will just have to get another job down here and survive like we've been doing before he came.
When we heard about this, we were doing a test match at Antigua, which had a touch of irony to it, actually, because it was a tragic tale. And being in Antigua at the time sort of added to that feeling. But I have to be honest, there was not a sense of being particularly surprised by the news.
Sources say criminal charges are not imminent. But with this case coming on the heels of the alleged Bernie Madoff scheme, there's strong pressure on the Justice Department to make Stanford pay.
My view is in a Ponzi scheme, you need to put everybody in jail as soon as possible. Why? Well, number one, they're going to flee. Number two, you have to let the investors know you give a shit about them. But number three is because you need to start provoking action. You need to start to get people's butts to pucker.
A new development in the scandal swirling around Stanford Financial Group. Today, the firm's chief investment officer, Laura Pendergast Holt, was brought to court in handcuffs. Federal prosecutors accuse her of lying to investigators.
I was humiliated and terrified. Of course, they had alerted the media, and so when they transferred me to the courthouse, it was just a circus. Everybody was there. That had been released, I'm assuming, by Paul Pelletier.
The perp walk was just a function of how the system is in Houston to get people from the prison van into the courtroom. And I didn't object.
That's a strategy to take the lower people and use charging them as a mechanism against the people higher up the food chain.
Yeah, you have the camera showing her, right? I'll try and keep track, but obviously my back's to her.
So I'm cuffed, and he looked at me and said, if you'll just plea to fraud, we're done. This will be the worst night of your life, and it'll all be over. And I said, I didn't commit fraud. I can't plead to that. That was...
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it is a pleasure for me to address the group. Start over.
Jim Davis went and got himself a criminal attorney, and the criminal attorney gave him some excellent advice, which is first perp through the door gets the deal.
It's like that game of musical chairs. You don't want to be the last defendant walking around those chairs, and then you're the last one without the chair. You're gonna get hammered. And I told Davis, we gotta beat Laura to the table, because if she becomes their star witness, she's gonna throw us under the bus, gonna throw Stanford under the bus, and both of you two guys are gonna die in prison. Jim kind of bullshitted me initially. He goes, I'm not Madoff. This isn't a Ponzi scheme. He goes, they're real assets. I got in his grill. I said, you want to get a life sentence? Keep this shit up. Did you cook the fucking books? That's what I'm asking you. Did you cook the books? Yes or no? And then he came clean.
From the government standpoint, Mr. Davis coming forward was the greatest thing that could have happened.
He was the knowledge of all, the one falsifying the records. He was the one making sure that the company continued in its deceiving of investors.
I knew that he was absolutely terrified. It's really hard for many clients, including James, who've not been in trouble before, to admit that they did wrong. In a room full of strangers, and you know that they could put you in prison for the rest of your life. You could die in prison. And my lawyer's telling me, tell the truth. That's tough.
Okay, Mr. Davis, whenever you're ready, go ahead. You've been sued by the Securities and Exchange Commission. You're being investigated by the Justice Department. What is it that you want people to know?
Well, first of all, this was not any kind of Ponzi scheme whatsoever. There was never any intent or plan to defraud anybody. And if anything was going on that wasn't correct, I didn't know about it. Let's put it that way.
When the SEC seized everything in February of 2009, Alan was very public about, we're going to make this right, I'm going to pay all my investors back, I'm going to reclaim everything, I'm going to fight for it. Well, the criminal case just kept getting hotter and hotter against him.
Did you take $1.6 billion in loans, personal loans out of the company that weren't disclosed to the shareholders?
No.
Your chief financial officer, who's a longtime friend of yours, is cooperating with the authorities right now. You feel betrayed?
Oh, I'm beyond being betrayed. I don't know what Jim Davis is saying. All I can tell you is that Alan Stanford has run no Ponzi scheme. Alan Stanford has set out to defraud no one. Period, the end.
Is there anything at all that you want to say to the investors, Mr. Davis, at this point?
Jim, sit right now.
Is there anything that you'd like to say to the investors?
I did wrong. I'm sorry. Apologize. I take responsibility for my actions.
My attorney called me and told me that he had gone in and met with the SEC. He had told them everything, and it was unfortunate because I didn't have all the information to tell them. I couldn't have pulled a Jim Davis.
He laid his soul bare. He told us that for 20 years, he and Alan Stanford had orchestrated an $8 billion Ponzi scheme. That's what he told us.
Alan Stanford going down, heading for the holding cells beneath the courthouse, where his alleged crimes were laid out before him.
Stanford, who denies any wrongdoing, already faces civil charges filed by regulators and now has been indicted on criminal charges.
He's accused of stealing $7 billion from investors. If convicted, Stanford could face 250 years in jail.
He was exceptionally arrogant. It was actually Alan's arrogance that cost him more than anything. Alan felt like he could beat it.
There's no law in the United States actually saying Ponzi schemes are illegal. What there is a law saying fraud is illegal, lying to people to get money from them. And this case is about the lies. He told investors their money was going to safe, liquid investments, bonds, stocks, liquid money. You can, like this, turn it back into cash and give the depositors their money back. They weren't being told your money is going to the Stanford cricket and to have a $20 million cricket prize that a helicopter drops on a cricket field. They didn't know that.
It's a wild-ass trial. The courtroom's packed. The press is all over the place. Jim Davis is scared out of his mind because he was a star witness. And Stanford's legal team knew that, and they went after him hard.
The problem with Davis was simply this. Davis had to be a liar for us to win. There is no other option. If they believe Davis, then we're sunk.
During Davis's testimony, Stanford was staring daggers at the man.
Stanford's sitting there looking at him like he wants to kick his ass. Hey, son bitch, you trying to put me in prison for the rest of my life? Old buddy pal? There was an occasion in the trial that I remember like it was yesterday. The jury was out for a lunch break. Well, Jim's sitting outside the courtroom where I am. Next thing I know, there's this big guy with these two marshals behind him standing there up over us, just glaring at Jim. It's Alan Stanford. He's trying to ice James Davis, trying to intimidate him. James realized who it was, and he just put his head down. So I stand up, and I'm 5'8" on a good day, in boots. And I just looked at him right in the eye. We made eye contact, and I just said, "Not today, buddy." He gave me a little smirk, went off and used the restroom, came back in, nothing happened. But that's the kind of guy you're dealing with. My guy's a crook, too. Don't get me wrong. But Alan Stanford's not just a crook. He is a stone-cold bully.
Alan's defense all the way through the trial, number one, was that there was no fraud, according to him, that everything was going to work out. And then number two was if there was fraud, Davis had done it.
Davis was a big deal for Alan because Davis and Alan went back a long ways. And so we had to demonstrate to that jury that Davis is a liar, cannot be trusted. There's all sorts of little nasty things about Davis that we wanted to go after. He portrayed himself as a very religious person, and obviously can't be religious, married, and have an affair. That makes no sense. So there's all sorts of ammunition to go after him with.
We acknowledge Jim Davis is a flawed person. He's got a sordid history, not just the financial fraud, which of course is one of the greatest frauds ever perpetuated, being a key architect of it. But at the end of the day, I thought Davis came across as a weak person, which ultimately helped because did he seem like the type of personality that could orchestrate and run a multi-billion-dollar fraud? Did he seem like that kind of powerful leader? I didn't think that fit into their narrative of Davis being the puppeteer who was pulling all the strings. And so I said to the jury, I said, this case was simple. Stanford lied to his investors about where their money was going. 2, he stole their money. He used it to fund his lavish lifestyle. And 3, the bribes. This was able to happen because he bribed the regulator. And we just said it's about those 3 things. And that's all you need to find him guilty.
Houston jury has made the decision finding financier Alan Stanford guilty today of running one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history.
Judge David Hittner called Stanford's $7 billion scheme one of the worst financial crimes ever, but Stanford was defiant till the end. In a rambling, sometimes emotional speech lasting more than half an hour, he said he is not a thief and said, "If I live the rest of my life in prison, I will always be at peace with the way I conducted myself in business."
The prosecutor just kind of let Stanford's final words hang in the air for a few minutes. And then he stood up and he said, "Judge, he's doing it again. He's trying one last con. He's trying to con you into giving him a lenient sentence. Don't let him get away with it." And the judge didn't let him get away with it and sentenced him to spend the rest of his life in jail.
Former billionaire Alan Stanford has been sentenced to, listen to this, 110 years in prison. It follows his conviction on 13 charges, including fraud and conspiracy.
Alan Stanford will go to prison for the rest of his life. He was also ordered to forfeit $5.9 billion. That is largely symbolic as well, since most of the money is gone.
I thought it was entirely appropriate. There are a lot of victims here. A lot of lives that have been destroyed.
I
think we had a steak dinner that
We had
night.
a steak dinner that night. We did.
Yeah.
We went to Vic and Anthony's and had a steak dinner with the entire team.
I think it was just. I mean, it's an incredibly long sentence, but the crime was so immense. I mean, it destroyed so many lives, changed those lives forever, that I think it was appropriate to send that message.
It was justice for Alan Stanford. It absolutely, positively, totally was not justice for the victims. Not justice at all for the victims.
28,000 people, 10 times the number of investors in Madoff, bought certificates of deposit from Stanford's Antigua bank. In sharp contrast to Madoff, Stanford's investors have recovered next to nothing.
Oh, we've only received pennies on the dollar. Pennies. And for some people, it was their life savings. People have killed themselves. They have died waiting for it. They've died in poverty. The repercussions of this are so devastating.
I've gotten about 5% back. That's all.
I feel cheated and slighted because we had worked, Ed and I both worked all our lives to make money and to save money and to invest. And I'm very resentful that it's not there for us now.
I don't consider myself to be a fool, but that one was over my head. It got me hook, line, and sinker.
I was sentenced to 3 years in prison. I lost everything. Jim Davis, people ask if I hate him. Honestly, he just doesn't exist to me anymore. Nobody betrayed me more in the company. Nobody betrayed me personally more than he did. And I think he got off the lightest.
My client, James Davis, gets sentenced to 5 years in the federal penitentiary, no early release or parole, and Alan Stanford gets 100+ years. And my guy was his right-hand man. My guy's the one that cooked the books, and my guy gets 5? And I'd love to say it's because I'm a great lawyer. No, honest. I'd love to say it was, and that I'm some genius. No, we got lucky.
He got a really good deal. 5 years for the amount of fraud was unconscionable by the judge. Absolutely unconscionable.
Giles Clark, chairman of the ECB. Sir Alan is the man after your own heart, surely.
Oh, very much so. He's a great and legendary entrepreneur. He has the entrepreneur's skill of spotting an opportunity and seizing it and taking it forward.
At the end of the day, the actual cold fact is he fooled a huge sporting corporation in the ECB.
He's been the sport's big bankroller, but the party's over, causing huge embarrassment for the man beside him at the launch, Giles Clark, the man who sold the soul of English cricket for cash.
You know, those decisions were made. Sitting around worrying about the past isn't going to get you anywhere in life, and if we did that, we would be doing nothing.
I mean, the biggest thing you can say now for looking back at that Stanford team is that they're some of the biggest players in T20 history now.
Captain's innings from Christopher Gale.
You know, since then they've won 2 World Cups, and a lot of it, as much as we don't want to sit here and give Alan Stanford any credit, but actually from that point of view, it really did kickstart the West Indies into some global superstar.
Sylvester Joseph.
I always want to be the best that I want to be, but I never really thought about being a millionaire, you know. I don't really like to talk about it, but unfortunately, where I put it, it got caught up as well. But it's just an experience. I look at it as just life. That's my story.
There's an old maxim that V.C. Bird used to say, listen, let them build it, they can't take it when they leave. I was shocked at the scale. I thought maybe he was doing a little hanky-panky along the way. Maybe. Because he was spending money in a manner that we are not accustomed to. Yeah? But we didn't know. There was nowhere we could have known. All of a sudden, across the board, you just had a wiping out of a whole section of commerce. For a small place like Antigua like that, for it to hit all at once was significant, very significant.
As one of the victims told me, he was building another country, but he was doing it with my money. He preyed on people's dreams and aspirations to give themselves and their families a better life, and he just took it all.
So, there's really not anything I can leave you with here tonight, any of you, that's going to turn any of you into a great leader. But what I can do is leave you with a little Texas humor. One afternoon, there was this big bull out in the middle of a Texas pasture. And up comes this turkey, and the turkey says, I want to fly to that tree, but I just don't have the energy to do it. And the bull said, well, I'll tell you what, if you'll eat that big pile of bull dung over there, it's full of nutrients, it's going to give you the energy to fly to the top of that tree. The turkey thought for a second, he said, oh, what the heck, I'll try anything. He pecked away, he got a full stomach of bull dung. I mean, this turkey is just full of bull dung. The next thing you know, he's full of energy, he flies to the top of the tree. The next thing you know, a farmer drives up, grabs his shotgun, shoots the turkey, kills him, he falls out of the tree. The moral to this story is if you're full of BS, it'll get you to the top, but it will never, never, never keep you there. Thank you very much. Thank you.